I'm in Seattle, Washington with Helge Petersen, and we're preparing for another GlobeRiders motorcycle tour. Last year, we filmed the first GlobeRiders documentary, an expedition in Iceland. This year, in the spring of 2002, we're preparing to head out on a new adventure, the GlobeRiders World Tour. It's the second time that Helge Petersen is leading a group of motorcyclists across Eurasia. The ride begins in Shanghai and heads through northern China to the border with eastern Russia. From there, we'll travel west across Siberia until we arrive in the Ukraine on the shores of the Black Sea. Then it's a quick jaunt across Eastern Europe to our ultimate destination in Munich, Germany. Altogether, it's a journey of 65 days and 11,000 miles.
The highlights would be, I think, culture. This is not the big nature experience as you can get other places in the world, but it's more about culture and meeting people. And just seeing the distance, crossing Siberia with 8 time zones, it's incredible. You sit and ride, and then you come to a little city. People are fantastic, very friendly. And then you come into Europe where it's busy, it's like an anthill, everything is alive and yelling at you, and it's a fantastic experience culturally. To go on a trip like this, traveling together with a group of motorcyclists, make it very special, because motorcyclists have a common interest. We are all motorcycle nuts, so to speak. But when you meet people, you are exposed, you are sitting there in the open, you're not hiding anything. You're just showing your whole body, you're showing yourself, and people get very curious, come up to you, and that way friendship starts.
Riding on this adventure is a total of 12 motorcyclists. 9 Americans, 2 Australians, 1 Brit, and our guide, Helge Petersen, a Norwegian who lives in the United States. I'm traveling in the chase vehicle as a cameraman, but I'm also available as a backup rider if needed.
G'day, Brian Clegg's my name. I'm from Australia. The motorcycle that I selected to do this trip on has been this 1984 R80 GS BMW.
I'm Roy Cox, and I live in Arlington, Texas, and I'm fulfilling a dream now that I've had all of my life, which is to ride a motorcycle around the world.
Good scenery, roads are okay, beer's not cold though.
My name is Jim Hay. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm educated as an accountant and a lawyer, and I was a professional baseball player for 8 years, and then I've worked for the Atlanta Falcons for 24 years.
Well, my name is Mike Matthews, and I live in Simpsonville, South Carolina. I've loved motorcycles since I was a little boy, and to have the opportunity to come to several countries I had never even dreamed I would ever go to, and to do it on a motorcycle really excited me.
I love motorcycling, and I certainly had a plan before being too old to do so, to see as much of the world as possible on 2 wheels. And one of the big blank spots on every map is China, and I saw this as something that I absolutely had to do, and amazingly here I am, and here we are.
I come up, I say, I'm from Chicago. Oh, Chicago. Yeah, that's the place.
I lived in Japan for 2 years, and I've traveled a bit throughout Asia. I have motorcycled a bit in Thailand, but it doesn't really compare to this.
Well, for me, it's relatively easy to decide to do something like this, even though I know the risk is extreme.
My name's Dave Wild. I'm from England. I've been an expatriate for 25 years. I've lived and worked all over the world. I've travelled the world, but for the last 7 years I've been living and working in Borneo, Indonesia.
My name's Ian Wood, and I live in Brisbane, which is in Queensland, Australia. I'm a consulting engineer, and I also have a stud cattle breeding operation as well.
I think everybody in this group has at one time or another wanted to go around the world or do some exotic adventure touring. Barring the fact that I don't have a couple of friends to do this with that have the same interests as I do as far as this kind of travel, this is the next best thing.
I hope that we've got a good group of people here. I think we've taken on probably a journey that has a pretty high level of difficulty.
I think if we all work together as a team, hopefully we'll have a good ride, and that's all I want to do. We get to have a good ride out of it.
To start out this trip, we first had to prepare the bikes and ship them to Shanghai. The day when we shipped the bike and were ready to pack them up, we needed to go through the customs. And they had to check all with a VIN number and have a notarized paper, basically so I couldn't send any stolen goods out of the country. When the two custom agents come, I think we were all a little nervous because you were wondering, are we going to run into trouble? Because that could be stopping the whole trip if we got some trouble. So hopefully all the bikes are there when we arrive by airplane. When I planned for the shipping, you try to cut costs everywhere. And I thought, okay, a 20-foot container, we can cram in 10 bikes there. So what we did, we put in 2 of them just for fit and measured, and very soon found out we need a 40-foot container.
It's a shame to have to go to a 40 though.
I think we're going to experience some difficulty. I think that there's going to be days that we're going to have things that just don't go right. In anything you do, I think to really be successful, you got to have a positive attitude, not be discouraged, look on the bright side, and make things better.
I knew Helgi from a previous trip in South America, and when I knew he was organizing this, there was no question in my mind that he's the guy I would do this with.
I've dealt with difficult custom guys, but always been able to work myself out of that. And through experience, I think I'm going to be able to pull off a lot of tricky situations.
Shanghai is China's largest city and one of the biggest seaports in the world.
Well, first we arrived, we were all content, you meet the other guys. Some of them you had never met before. They had just been in an email address or a voice on the phone. Then comes one setback after the other, and it's like, oh no, this is not going to happen. And as we speak, we are waiting for the last paperwork, and perhaps tonight we get the bikes out.
We were all excited when we arrived in Shanghai, and we had some problems getting our motorcycles cleared through customs.
2 days we spent sitting on the bus chatting, but that's really no problem. That's their approach. You accept that, you're in their country, and you work with how they do things.
The thing that surprised me most, I think, was just the incredible amount of hassle that everybody had to go through to import the motorcycles. I had certainly heard from other people when I told them that I was going to China that you're not going to be able to do that, or lots of jokes about you're going to be riding bicycles or going on foot. And for a while it actually looked like it might be that way.
My favorite question was what court you go to if you have a traffic accident and can't settle it on the street.
If you run somebody over or somebody runs you over, how many days have you got before you can sue them?
I couldn't even read something about perovskite.
I don't know what my score was, but I failed.
55%.
I got 55.
I think I've been proven to be thoroughly unqualified to drive a motorcycle. I scored a 40, which is probably the lowest score here.
It's real, man. They gave me a license anyway.
The 10 bikes in the container from Seattle has already arrived. Actually, there are 2 Australian bikes that's still out on the ocean here, and we hope they come in. They say they are going to come in tomorrow. Finally, no, today I'm totally psyched. This is going to be so cool. Everybody is content to get going.
Oh man, it feels great. I missed it just like a doll. I think I was as psyched up as anybody could have been, and I was just really anxious to get on my bike, and I had no idea what lay ahead of us.
So who is 008?
There are not motorcycle groups from foreign countries to China every year. This group problem never stopped. The custom formalities is very complicated.
David what?
John. What?
9.
9.
100% failure on the license test, nonetheless. I just want to get on the road and ride and see this amazing country. And I guess the plan from here is to make it to Munich.
Shanghai was a tremendous city. It's a very large city. It was very different to what I was expecting. It's got the old sort of colonial hub of the city, but spreading out from that, there's massive development taking place. very futuristic, modern, exciting architecture, new buildings going up, very tall, interesting buildings. The whole city is alive and buzzing, and it's just an exciting place to be.
Riding in the traffic, I think we all went kind of crazy. We couldn't imagine how it was until we actually got out there in it.
Coming back from the freight yard, it was less than a 40-mile ride, and we had a motor vehicle accident, a police incident, and just curious people waving and honking the whole way through. It was pretty amazing.
We approached some traffic lights and there was a van at the side of me looking at my bike, and the next thing his van is rolling down the road at the side of me and I had to hit the gas and get out of the way, so that was a very, very scary moment yesterday. It turns, the next minute, it's rolling over at the side of me and I'm oh, hit the gas, get out of here quick. It's amazing.
The riding plan for today is that we are going to go to Nanjing. The two Australians, Ian and Brian, is going to be back here waiting for their bikes, and then they are going to catch up with us in Beijing.
Cutting your way through traffic here is kind of interesting. It's a variety of fun, it's challenging, and it's on occasion scary, and sometimes all three.
China was the craziest place I've ever drove in the world. They just don't care about anything, they just drive as they want, where they want, and I've never experienced driving like it.
It's very slow riding because of the traffic. You pass to the left, you pass to the right, you pass any way you can, just pass. And I really believe that the Chinese will license anything with a motor and a horn. And they're required to use that horn at least once every 2 minutes.
People in China seem to be almost oblivious to what's coming right toward them, and we had to really be careful about not hitting people. And I was amazed we never ran into someone.
There's no rules or laws at all. It's kind of just run what you brung and run it hard. You see a red light, you just barge right on through. You almost get run over at every intersection. It's just, there's no laws at all.
We did have to ride in convoy. It was a restriction placed on us by the government. We had to adjust to each other's individual styles of riding, and we did that very quickly. There was no big dramas there. And we tended to stick in the same relative positions.
Our guide, I know, was very frustrated. Sim, you could see that on his face. But we dealt with it and we went on. And anytime you're traveling in a foreign country, you have to learn how to deal with things that are not in your homeland. And that's all part of some of the adventure.
We went through a little town and had to stop for some electrical problems. The whole town came out to greet us. They looked at our bikes and started asking questions, and in particular, I have my grandchildren's picture pasted on my motorcycle, and they had a lot of interest in that. It really made us feel like we were welcome there.
One of the things I think about China just seems to be the insatiable curiosity of the people here. Something as simple as taking a picture. There's always 2 or 3 people that will come up, or maybe a couple of couples, and comment on what you're doing and give you a thumbs up if you've done a good picture, and maybe you should do it again if you do a bad one. So it's actually in a way very refreshing. It seems that people are curious about what's going on outside, what's going on beyond their borders, and so far it's been just a really great experience.
What a wonderful experience. I don't know what we expected, but this was even better than I expected. Being with the people in the group, unbelievable. Such excitement I've never seen before.
Well, the most difficult thing for me was the trouble that I had with my bike. In particular, the electrical problems that were intermittent, that would come and go. They were so severe that I was concerned that I may not be able to complete the trip, or at the very least be a great burden on the people that were traveling with me.
The battery isn't charging, the rear brake light is on permanently, the front headlight is flickering, but you know what, the bike's running. I'm happy. We're going to make it to Beijing today, and when we get there, I'm going to break out my wiring diagram and I'm going to find it this time. We're going to find it. We're going to keep going.
Oh, the ride is going very well today. It's started off in the rain as usual for the last 3 days, but Looks like the front's clearing out and the road is dry right now. It's interesting, we're washing all these bikes here, and I understand we've got dirt road ahead, so.
I think the dreaded Provincial Road is something I'll never forget, where we had to take this detour after a car was crammed into the side of a construction pile of dirt.
Don't drive at night if you can't see where you're going. I don't know what this guy was thinking, but he probably was just coasting along pretty darn fast. Looks pretty bad. I hope he's okay.
The dreaded provincial roads that we had to get off into because of the detour on the main highway was probably the thing that leaves the biggest impression on me. Riding through the mud and rain and the really messy potholes in those roads was something I won't forget. It was the worst riding I had ever been in on my big motorcycle I ride.
I'm getting blown around on that road with that wind. It's getting challenging out there.
That'll make it better for the next 5 seconds.
This is where the adventure starts.
China's most interesting things that caught my attention first were the vehicles. And every one of them is being used to move something. The donkey carts are pulling hay, the tractors are pulling trailer loads of bricks. It's just the way they can utilize their vehicles. I mean, they make the most out of the least.
Most of them were heavily overloaded. We saw miniature tractors pulling loads of stone, maybe 10 or 12 tons. And we saw all kinds of different vehicles on the roads that you couldn't even imagine how some of those could be allowed to travel on a public road.
By traveling the back roads, we saw villages and we saw people that a normal tourist in China is not going to encounter, not going to run into. And I remember one day in particular, we were at a gasoline station getting gas, and these people were riding by on their bicycles and they had their shovels strapped onto their bicycle. They had been to work and their shovel was their tool. Everyone was so friendly, they were curious, and even though we couldn't communicate verbally, through eyes and through hand motions and looking at the motorcycles and showing them the trip map that we have on the side of our motorcycles, just enthused them very much, and they wanted to communicate more, but you know, it's just difficult and you couldn't do it.
The thing I probably remember that I'll never forget is our stop by the little restaurant where people had never seen foreigners before. We had a dirt floor. The people were just, I think, flabbergasted to see us. That was one of our early experiences with the way life really is in the interior of China, some back-a-ways. The food was good. None of us got sick.
Yeah, we've had chicken's feet, chicken's toes, we had a pig's head, lots of body parts.
I think as a guide, my biggest challenge leading this tour is to get everybody to Munich. That's what I'm very concerned about. You know, it could be terrible to have an accident into the trip and somebody get seriously wounded. That's my really biggest fear. So safety, beyond anything, that's the most important factor.
You have to have a good deal of patience. Give yourself lots of time to get wherever you're going, and you'll find it very, very interesting, but be patient, enjoy it, and don't rush things, because if you do, something unfortunate could happen because there's just so many obstacles in the way. He was 50 yards in front of me, and all I saw is the bike down, the bike sliding along the ground, and then Mike tumbling. I saw a red van on his left, and I thought maybe the van had pulled over on him, but I didn't see the van hit him. I just saw the bike go down.
Just let them do what they need to do with him. Not take him away, but of course listen to Mike, but take a full check of him.
Can you feel? Move. It hurts. Done.
Yeah, it just feels like, you know, just something's sprained back there.
Your life is in your hands in China. They don't drive by the same rules. They have no rules in China. It's every man for himself. And nobody tries to hit anybody else, but at the same time, their first regard is for themselves and where they're going.
Somebody stay with my bike.
I think we got in a little bit too big a hurry, and doing it again, we might be wiser to take it just a little bit slower. Our adrenaline was up. My adrenaline was up all the way through China. It was such an experience there.
Watching Mike Paul crash, and later that afternoon leaving him in a hospital. That was definitely the hardest part of the trip for me.
They're asking me just to stay here because only one lung is functioning right now, and they just want to get that stabilized before they move me to Beijing.
I didn't realize it's so serious at first. I just asked them if they have the X-ray machine, then we can check, and then we go. But until I see the picture, I realized she finished his journey there.
What about your riding gear and
I'd like to keep that here.
Yeah, you want that.
It probably meant more to him than it meant to a lot of us, to be quite frank with you, and it meant a lot to me, but I'm very disappointed for Mike.
Okay, you stay strong.
Yeah, we'll see you. Thanks a lot for all your help.
We reached a very important stop in our world tour, and we come to Beijing.
It's a very historic city. I didn't realise the amount of history within the city itself and just on its outskirts. And you could spend another week there, I think, easily and not probably see it all.
We are outside the capital and up at the Great Wall, and it's one of the big marvel of the universe. 6,700 kilometers of the Great Wall cover this huge country.
The section of the Great Wall that we went to, like they built it over a period of 300 or 400 years. But when you looked at from down in the car park at that section, it's just mind-blowing how they got all that rock and stone up there and obviously packed it with mortar, and just a mind-blowing thing. And we only saw a small section of it. It goes for thousands of kilometres. Even today, to try and set out to build something like that would be a real achievement to finish off.
This is very, very important stop for us, both historically and also for the group. And Mike Paul, he is in the hospital in Beijing now and waiting for the transport home to Seattle. It was hard psychologically for everybody. One of the greatest contributors to this whole concept, this whole story. But as Mike said himself, you guys just hang in there, be strong and get going. So tomorrow, 7 o'clock sharp in the morning, we are heading out on new adventures. And now we are heading into Inner Mongolia and Russia after that.
In China, I don't know what my expectations were. I knew they were a somewhat progressive country. I knew they were trying to become a bigger power in the world. But I think I didn't understand the infrastructure, the buildings they're putting in place. Almost every city we went to, there was construction going on, new modern buildings. So you have to be impressed with what the Chinese people are doing.
China just seems to be got the right attitude, and they're going for the 21st century. It just seemed a hive of activity, and there was construction going on, everywhere throughout China.
In China, you had people that were looking forward to the future. China is rapidly building up their infrastructure, their buildings, their roads. You can see the people are looking forward to the future. They think the future is going to be better than today.
Nothing like the fresh air and clean living. It is just so clean. It's maybe a little bit worse than LA, just a little bit. But I feel good. We had a great ride.
Well, I can't wait till we get to Russia so we can open it up and get off from behind the lead car. But other than that, I'm looking forward to Lake Baikal. Really looking forward to that, and all of Siberia.
I think the last week has been a little trying for us, but we really enjoyed getting together and working as a team to make it through and have no other accidents.
Well, I think it was pretty good fun that we were escorted from the last town we stayed at through to here by the local Chinese bike club. They did a pretty good show, and we all arrived here safely. It's something I've never ever seen before, and we're very privileged to have the chance to come along and do this trip.
All the bike riders was waiting for us there, and they invited us to the bike shop, and we didn't know how to get there, and we ended up riding around in a police car with two policemen, and the sirens were going, and bikers were driving all over the road acting crazy, and nobody seemed to give a damn what they was doing.
Last night we met the fella here that on the Harley Davidson. We started to talk to him, told him where we wanted to go. He took us to this motorcycle shop. I've never seen a person ride a motorcycle like this man rides a motorcycle. He must have been going through town, dodging traffic, doing U-turns, probably on his Harley running 60 or 70 miles an hour through town. Then from there, they came back, looked at the motorcycles, and we ran into the fella here in the blue jacket that rode a motorcycle from here all the way across China, up in the highest of altitudes.
He's a newspaper reporter for the local paper, and he told us last night that he rode his 220cc Yamaha from Harbin to Lhasa in Tibet and back. That's 3,000 miles each way. He went over mountain passes as high as 7,000 meters. He said it was damn cold. He slept by the side of the road for 3 nights. And he did a whole trip, 30 days each way.
Helmet signing ceremony.
We spent almost 4 hours with these guys before a friend finally showed up that could speak English and we could communicate. But within that 4 hours, just using hand signals, sights, looking and seeing, we were able to communicate and understand.
They put the Chinese word boomer or beamer or whatever it is. He put it in Chinese, they put BMW. Then they signed their name on several of the motorcycles. So it's really kind of an attractive thing, real keepsake.
They love motorcycles just as much as we do. So even though we don't share a language in common, we share a love of motorcycles. And at the end of it all, they gave me this wonderful jacket, and they wouldn't say no. I couldn't refuse it. And it's beautiful, and I'm very touched. They're wonderful people. You know, you go to a foreign country, you expect people to be a little bit curious about you, but perhaps be a little reserved too. But the Chinese people treated us like family. We all felt that friendliness, and we all felt that kindness that came from the Chinese people, and I didn't really expect that.
I think for your group, you have more chance to know China. You not only see the big cities, you also see the countryside, see the farmers. The traditional farmer's life is very simple. They have no medical care, they have very low income. But nowadays, young people, they still want to leave this farmland and try to find a job in the city. The whole country, everywhere, a lot of people moving from countryside to the city or to the suburbs.
In the city, it seems to be progressive. They seem to be moving forward, but then we go into the countryside. Some of the people have just not experienced a lot of things that we've had the opportunity to experience in America. We went by one place and it had rained, and I saw a lady out washing clothes in a puddle. To me, that's very difficult. Even though there's progressive cities out in the country, I kind of felt sorry for the people and wish they had an opportunity to do better than they're doing.
Towards the end of our time in China. We were getting towards the sort of Mongolian region, and as we rode into this small town, the local mayor had organised a traditional welcome for us. There was a party of young girls and village elders dressed up in their traditional clothes. They came out to greet us and presented us with a drink and what have you. And it was so unexpected. There we were, just in the middle of the countryside, and there's this group of people on the road, and they made us really feel welcome, and I won't forget that.
So the local government and also the press heard that your group come in. They just express their welcome to you. That's the Mongolian way to welcome the distinguished guests.
We came on this trip, I guess, looking for adventure, and these last 3 days has just been beyond anything we could possibly imagine or could have hoped for. It's just been fantastic.
And here we've got 65 days to travel through several different countries where people look very different, act very different, think differently, and speak different languages. And it's a bit of sensory overload. It's hard to digest all of that. But it does appeal to one thing that a traveler really likes, and that is you never get bored. There's always something new and exciting and different and unexpected just around that next corner. And it may be bad, but it's probably going to be very good. One thing's for sure, it will get your attention.
These are the chicken embryos, huh? That's what these things are? You tell me when they're good and done.
She's got the right idea. I'd burn it to hell before I ate it.
Okay.
I suppose the comedy was a lot of the things that we ate that we didn't really expect to see. Many of them were not very easily identifiable.
Eat its little head off. No, truthfully, what's it taste like?
The secret to this is not thinking about what it is you're eating.
And not swallowing. Open away. Oh, this picture makes you
You gotta eat it. You gotta eat it. I ate mine. You gotta eat it.
Looks like you're trying to throw up in this one.
Some of the roads in China were a little sandy, and that made it difficult. There was a lot of gravel and loose dirt that wasn't so difficult to ride in, but probably because of our enthusiasm, we rode too close to each other, and it made it a little dangerous, and I think I learned to lay back a little bit. You really can't see where you're going.
We had that one day, I think it was about 170 miles of dirt interspersed by some blacktop. Although I didn't know it at the time, I think that was the day I enjoyed riding the most.
In China, you're going to find the roads vary in quality dramatically from, at the best, they're going to be as good as American superhighways, and at the worst, there's a road, they're going to be terrible. There's not going to be an inch that is going to be level. I'm learning that on a fully loaded KLR for the first time, and it's a handful.
I don't think any of the ride was difficult for a good rider if he had a bike that's suitable. I found the bike I ride, I might or might not ride that bike again, being an 1150 GS. It's a very heavy bike, especially when loaded with gear. I think everyone's got to tailor what they choose to their own ability and their strengths. You don't want too big a bike if you're not able to handle it at slow speeds.
I prefer a smaller bike for this kind of riding. That was another consideration. I really didn't want to bring the GS because I've seen what guys did to them in South America. This trip could be done by an average rider who's had little experience in gravel road and is careful. The hardest part is it's mental. It's mental, it's not physical.
When we all started off, we were all a little bit nervous and unsure of what we were going to expect, but now we're settling into a routine. We're riding more comfortably. We're really enjoying the rides now. The roads are opening up. They're more fun, less traffic. We can go a little faster, and we're all having a ball.
You know, I noticed that we're handling ourselves better on the roads. We're coordinating amongst the bikes a little bit better than we were at the beginning. I think it's going to be a lot easier, particularly once we get into Russia. So the hard parts, that's behind us. You know, the bikes are well shaken down. Things are running well. Our spirits are high. We're having a blast. Every day is like a dream, and I don't want to wake up.
That first day, the road wasn't particularly special, but the feeling of riding with you know, a clear road out in front of us, no other vehicle in sight. Oh man, that was wonderful.
The Siberian Taiga, a vast pine-covered landscape and one of the coldest places on Earth in the winter. Historically a land of nomads and exiles, Siberia stretches from the Pacific Ocean all the way to the Ural Mountains in the west. We'll be setting our clocks often as we travel across the 8 different time zones that make up Siberia. The famous Trans-Siberian Railway makes the trip in a week. We'll need 3 weeks to cover the same distance.
It seems like we've gone through about 5 or 6 different states in the U.S. I've seen eastern Texas, I've seen Wyoming, I've seen upstate New York, definitely. Yesterday afternoon reminded me very much of southeastern Utah. So Siberia is extremely diverse.
Eastern Siberia just blew me away with the hills, the mountains, the green, the villages, the people.
I would say the economics crossing the border from China into Russia were extremely different, very striking. We went from a country that very populated and seems to be doing very well economically, and we come across the border and it was like almost a third world country. It was kind of sad.
You're driving along the road and you see buildings that are burned out, empty, half constructed, not maintained in decades. Particularly out here in Siberia, where they had a stronger military presence a decade or 2 ago. It just seems as if all that money that went into it was shut off immediately. And when that happened, it was a sharp blow to the economy. And the people here aren't looking forward to the future, they're just trying to get by today. And it's a very tough life for them.
I see young people in Russia that are very smart, very open, very energetic, and very frustrated. And I think times will change in Russia, but right now people have a real psychological problem to get ahead.
I have great respect for the people here because it isn't an easy life. And once you do get to know them, they're warm, friendly people. But it's a struggle for them, and you can see it in their eyes, you can see it in the way they walk. It's very hard.
So what's on the menu, Mr. Rick?
Well, I'm just going to point to a bunch of stuff on here.
You are?
Yeah.
You are so brave.
It's difficult for them to have a good job and to make a good living, but they want to, but there's some uncertainty. We need to pay attention to Russia and help them in ways that we can to help them turn the economy, because they have a marvelous country. It's a humongous country and it has a lot of resources, and it can be very economically good for all the people, but they've got some work to do.
Well, the funniest thing is buying gasoline. The person selling it was usually behind a glass pane, often with reflective cover on it, and you could only talk to them either through a microphone or by yelling.
13 liters.
And the only connection to get the money through to them was usually a hatch or a trap door or a sliding tray.
13. Looks like she understood that.
So I'm going to pay for it. And then we'll see how many liters go in there to see if we got that right.
The means to transmit what you actually wanted, you'd stand back every day and just kill yourself laughing, as long as it didn't involve you.
Unique system we have here, prepay. Okay, let's see where the button is here.
Just let go.
Last time I had somebody do this, they locked the thing up and squirted gasoline all over the place.
Well, you gotta give it to him.
He took it.
He took it. Hey, now you
I would
want
order
me.
50. No,
You
you
want
were
me
too
big
far.
time.
You have to be fast in this game.
I tell you, well, this is a real treat.
Now this way he gets gas off both of us.
I know.
What would you like? Hey, we have a lineup here. I would have a milkshake, please.
Our first day of riding in Siberia ends in Chita, the city of exiles.
And you go to school in Chita?
Yes.
How many students are you? How many? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many? Skolka. 15. All boys?
No.
Where are the girls?
Girls and boys.
Oh, there they are. Oh, beautiful girls. You're lucky. Oh.
Tarbagate is an isolated village south of Lake Baikal. In the 17th century, a group of religious exiles from Poland fled here to escape persecution. They're known as the Semieski, or Old Believers, a name that comes from their belief that they practice the real Orthodox faith.
Рады видеть вас у себя в Бурятии, в Сибири, в холодной, суровой Сибири.
We are really glad to meet you, to welcome you at this territory at Siberian Buryatia, and it is considered to be the coldest place on earth in wintertime. Today you are welcoming at the Old Believers. They are called Semieski. It is a Russian word which means the ones who brought their families.
The Old Believers settled here almost 250 years ago. Despite the long winters and a history of religious persecution, they've managed to survive the hardships of life in this remote part of Siberia.
The history of Old Believers is much older than the history of America's independence. A long time ago, there was a reform in Russia which just made people go into two parts, and the one part who didn't accept this reform, so they'd have to go abroad to Poland, and another part accepted this reform and stayed at the territory of Russia.
These people welcomed us into their homes, and they taught us about their beliefs, and they told us about their history, and they were just extraordinarily friendly. That was an experience that could very well be the height of all that I've experienced in Russia, and I will never forget them.
It just epitomizes what we run into with the people of Siberia. They just take you right into their house, and then they feed you, and it's just like your family. I mean, you're there.
I grew up in Alaska, and I always thought that Siberia had to be very similar to Alaska. And my generation, Russians and Americans were having a Cold War, but I always felt that similar climate, similar countryside would generate similar people, and I think it does.
Riding in a group is very interesting to observe the dynamics of the riders within the group. I personally like to see an open road out in front of me. I don't like to be looking at the back of another car or even the back of another rider, so I do like to be out in front. There's also some benefits for riding in the small groups of maybe 2 or 3 bikes as well. Sometimes people needed assistance with their vehicles that were maybe giving trouble, or sometimes people weren't comfortable about finding their directions. So yeah, some days you feel like riding, in a small group. Sometimes you feel like riding on your own, and you're free to do whatever you like.
It was wonderful being alone for once without having to be in a group. Nothing against any of the guys I'm with. I think we all felt the same way. But being able to ride really fast if we went, or to go really slow and be able to take a million pictures. So yeah, the freedom all of a sudden that we have is really nice.
One of the most beautiful places in Russia is Lake Baikal, the gem of Siberia. This vast reservoir contains 1/5 of the world's fresh water. It's frozen to a depth of 3 feet or more from December to May.
Oh, it was invigorating. It was pretty darn good.
Yeah, that's the word for it. Very invigorating. Whoa.
The trip on Lake Baikal, the scenery is just beautiful. The mountains and hills coming down to the water, and the vodka we drank on the way back was pretty memorable too for me. I can't remember a lot of it, but...
Around the lower edge of Lake Baikal was a very nice ride. We got to stop by the lake and enjoy a few minutes there. That day was pretty mixed for me though. That's the same day that I toppled my bike over at the lake and ended up hurting my ankle and breaking it in a couple of places.
What's happened?
No place for my foot.
No, let me take it. Okay. The riders that signed up for this experience had to go through a screening process where they answered 25 questions. Roy answered his 3rd question. What is your age? He wrote, honestly, 67 years. Please do not stop here. So that's his attitude. He feels at 67, he is not out of shape, he is well fit, he knows how to ride a bike. So please don't leave me out of this. This is an experience that I waited for all my life.
I found this group that I ride with, almost everybody is an expert. And I'll tell you what, it's a pleasure to ride with guys that are really good motorcycle riders, and very experienced. I mean, I'm really impressed with the riding capability of almost all our people here. And that's been a good experience, a learning experience for me. It certainly let me see where I stand in the pile.
As a backup rider on this trip, Roy's misfortune is my own good fortune, and I'm looking forward to riding the big GS across Siberia.
Right now we're just outside of Novosibirsk, which is the capital of Siberia, and it's approximately the midway point of the tour, and also approximately the midway point east-west of the entire country of Russia. So basically we're pretty much out there. We're in Siberia, and there's just one road that we're following right now, M51. It's been M53, M55 at other times on our journey. All roads in this area lead to Moscow, and like I said, currently we're on M51. So it's not real easy to get lost, but one of the things I want to talk about right now is satellite navigation systems that we use, GPS in other words. This is actually one of the first times that I've used modern GPS this extensively, and I can tell you from this trip that it's something that I'm definitely going to be bringing with me more and more as I take these kinds of journeys around the world. You can think of a GPS as sort of an electronic compass. Using the satellites in the sky, it's able to pinpoint its location on the surface of the Earth, and from that it can tell you such things as which direction is north, which direction you're heading, what your speed is, your estimated time of arrival if you have a destination plugged into it. and all kinds of other useful information. Now, Helge's traveled this route before on the World Tour a couple years ago, and every time he stayed overnight in a particular town, he would mark the location of the hotel. That way, when we come back again, now 2 years later, we can call up those waypoints, and it will give us a unique location in which to navigate towards throughout the day. In other words, we're not going to get lost. For this particular trip on the World Tour, we've got more than 30 waypoints stored, one for each day of driving that we'll be doing. And every particular waypoint represents a hotel that we'll be staying at. And then we also have this sheet, which tells in English and in Russian the name of the hotel and its location. So we can use these when we pull into town, and if we start to talk to a stranger, we don't speak Russian, they don't speak English, we show them this piece of paper, they get the idea where we're trying to go, they can point us on our way.
For this trip especially, it was really remarkable. There were 2 or 3 times where trying to find a hotel in a city where you don't know your way around in it, and you look down at the GPS and it would say 0.4 mile, 0.3 mile, 0.2, 0.1, and then you're down to 300 feet, and I would look up and there's the hotel sign. It was like, wow, that's pretty neat.
So that's just a little bit of information on the Garmin GPSs that we're using on the World Tour here. I'm not an expert on GPS technology, I'm a beginner, but in my opinion they're very useful, and I plan on using them a lot more in the future. So we'll see you down the road, and have good riding.
Today it looks very nice and calm, it's a sunny day, but in the winter, man, you can get -40, -50. Here from Lake Baikal and onward, it's going to be many long stretches, lonely stretches. I love it. I love these lonely, long roads.
Even though Siberia is sparsely populated, there are some big cities along the way. In fact, we encountered the worst traffic jam of the whole journey on a tour of Krasnoyarsk.
The bus is not a problem. My body was blue car, get out of the way. Come on, blue car. Beep beep. Beep beep, beep beep. Come on, blue car, come on.
We went through so many large cities of 500,000 or 1 million people or more that I had never heard of. Before I came on this trip, everybody looks at the map, and I'm seeing these different places we're going to stop at, and they're just dots on the map. And then when you get there, they're somewhat modern cities, and the people are dressing in the latest styles. The girls are beautiful, the way they dress, the way they walk, the way they look. But the size of the cities, these are not just small little towns, little specks in the map. These are cities.
Passing through Kemerovo, we found a Russian wedding in progress.
You know, that story was that the Russian wedding was basically dead. I mean, they had been partying by themselves, and then when we got there, everything started livening up again. I mean, the girls wanted you to dance with them. I mean, the guys wanted to talk. I mean, they wanted stories, and the vodka. I mean, the vodka just kept going.
I've been sitting here 5 hours waiting for you fellas to roll up. I've been watching this girl. She's been checking out the bike, and I'm thinking, well, how am I going to pull a move here? 5 hours later, you guys rock up. Within 5 seconds, she's on the back of Helga's bike. And how does the guy do it? I don't know.
You know, I thought the women around Shanghai were about as pretty a group of women as I'd ever seen in my life. And then we got to Russia, and those women in Shanghai came in second best every time. I had at least 2 people in Siberia came up to me at that wedding we crashed. One of them, the guy says, "I love America." And I'm looking at him, really? I kind of like Siberia myself.
Maybe it was the mystique of the motorcycles. That's hard to say. Maybe it was because we were Americans. But to be brought into an environment as special as having a wedding and not even knowing our names or who we were was just really moving for me.
Well, I danced with the sister of the bride. I got her name, I got she liked Americans, and her boyfriend doesn't.
Well, I had the mama that I thought was pretty cool, and you know why she danced with me?
Why?
And that she was about 40, because I reminded her of her father.
After the wedding, a local motorcycle club invited us to a drag racing event on the outskirts of Novosibirsk, the capital of Siberia.
They had the starter lights and they had the lasers at the end, and they could tell you what your time was. And everybody just stood out there. They tried to keep them away from the start, from the end of the drag strip there. You know, people kind of moved back as the vehicle came down.
Everybody's having fun and get out here and race their car and enjoy themselves. It's too bad we still can't do this at home.
This is where the USA was 30, 40 years ago, you know, which was a lot of fun. Not what you would expect in Siberia. It's not what I expected in Siberia. But it was a really hot day. I mean, we were cooking. It was a long wait, but it was well worth the wait.
After watching from the sidelines for a few hours, some of the GlobeRiders decide to participate.
I had no idea we were going drag racing. All I knew was we were going to go watch some drag races. And people needed to participate, and here we were, and we had several bikes that were could be competitive against each other, so we asked them, could we sign up? And they said, yeah, come on, sign up. So we signed up. Oh, there was no forms, no liability form, no nothing. We just found a guy who spoke English, and he says, yeah, come on, I'll help you out. So we went over there, and we got our names on the roster.
Well, we just like to see how our bikes match up, I guess. Besides, everybody else is racing, so why not us?
We decided we'd run the Kawasaki against the Honda, and the winner would then take on the BMW. And we had another BMW, two BMWs race each other also. So we had 3 races, you know, which they really helped. It added to the program.
It's no surprise that motorcycles with sidecars are everywhere on the streets of Irbit. That's because this small town in the Ural Mountains on the western edge of Siberia is the home of Irbit Motorcycle Works, manufacturer of the Ural motorcycle with sidecar. Designed for the rough Russian roads, the economical Ural motorcycle has become a ubiquitous feature of the Russian landscape.
The Ural motorcycle is basically a blue copy of the early 1940s BMW. It's a boxer engine, opposite cylinders, two-cylinder, air-cooled, drive shaft driven, 650, now they're up to 750 cc's. And it's built very rugged, it's very rough engineering, and the purpose of it is to survive the difficult road conditions in Siberia.
With a population of 50,000 people and 24,000 registered motorcycles, Irbit holds the world record as the city with the most motorcycles per capita.
I think one of the reasons you see so many Urals with sidecar is that it's built for practical purpose. They are meant to be a practical tool for the common person that use them. For them it's the step towards getting a car. So they use it to transport all from babuskas to plants to family members. I've seen bicycles, I've seen all kind of stuff in them.
Of course, we had to visit the factory that makes the Ural motorcycle.
The first motorcycle was built in Moscow in 1941.
When World War II started in 1939, the Nazis captured half of Europe in just a couple of months. The Russian government realized that it needed new troops that were fast, extremely mobile, and capable of carrying heavy weapons. Enter the Russian M72 motorcycle with sidecar. Reverse engineered from the BMW R71 motorcycle, the Russian model was alike in all details. During the war, the factory produced almost 10,000 M72 motorcycles. After the war, Irbit Motorcycle Works began making motorcycles for the general public.
When the Ural factory started, it was all made for military purpose. Then it went over to the civilian market. Actually, at one time there were 10,000 people working there, and they produced something like 30 to 35,000 units per year. Since then it's been going down. There are imports, there are other competition. So now when the factory is scaling back the way they are doing, from going from 10,000 to 3,000 and this year down to 1,000 employees, it's devastating for the economy in town. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they are going to manage. They are just working few days a month producing this bike. And it will be interesting to see if they at all survive.
Today, Irbit Motorcycle Works is a privately owned company that continues to make their heavy-capacity motorcycles and sidecars for the Russian market and exports worldwide. After leaving the factory, we headed out of town to meet up with another motorcycle club, the Irbit Bike Group.
Being motorcyclists, you are always interested to learn about other motorcycle cultures, so to speak. And this is a very unique culture because it's not built around the sport of motorcycling. It's more about transportation as a necessity and the step up to a car. That's the tradition here, which we are not used to.
Even though production at the factory is down, the guys at the Irbit Bike Club are keeping busy with plans for a new three-wheeled prototype that's under construction. We're riding across the Volga region, an area that contained established trade routes long before the country of Russia even existed. Today, large diesel trucks dominate the roads on our mud-soaked journey across the Volga.
I stopped a farmer on a tractor and he says only 3 kilometers and you'll be back on the good road. So off I go down the road. I hadn't gone 100 meters. The back end fishtailed on me and the bike slid right down in the embankment probably about 4 feet. So here I am with the motorcycle laying on its side. No way I can get it back up by myself. 2 farmers come by, help me get the motorcycle back up, and I very carefully go there 3 kilometers down the road and get back on the pavement. really quite funny.
If someone was planning a trip across China and Russia, there's no doubt at all in my mind that first of all you need to be well equipped, you need to have the tools and the spare parts to ensure that the bike keeps running, and you need to be reasonably confident that you can either conduct the repair yourself or be able to look over somebody's shoulder and tell them what it is that needs fixing. And there's very, very long stretches of lonely road between cities, and you can be many hours from assistance if you have a breakdown.
Bike preparation, I think, is very important. There's been a few people on this trip who I don't think did enough preparation and have suffered because of it, or the bike hasn't been suitable for the trip. You need a bike that's really suitable, and I'm not the greatest BMW fan, but I am now, or I wasn't, but I am now. The BMWs have fared pretty well over the whole trip, I think, much better than most of the others.
From the early start of this trip, we've been kind of chased by problems. First we had the accident with Mike, and then we had several mechanical failures, and this last week has been really hard because we had 2 Kawasaki's break down just at the same time, had to be transported in a car we sent them 2 days ahead, so we had some time to work on them. And actually today we came to the point that one bike is disqualified from the trip. It's actually left there in Russia.
Dust Eater has bitten the dust. It's going to take its final trip to the Happy Hunting Grounds in Russia. I mean, it just died. And when we've taken it to the mechanics, from our expertise and their expertise, we're not completely agreeing on what's wrong with it. But the bottom line is, I can't trust it for the next 4,000 miles. I'm selling it to somebody who feels they can fix it and make use of it. And now it's time to find something else.
You sure you don't want to buy this BMW sitting right over here?
Oh, I'd love to, but we're still talking paperwork. The Russian title, and I can't register in the United States, and I don't have a European address. Makes it tough, but it's a beautiful bike and the price isn't that bad.
And what is your plan from here?
I'm a bus rider. I'm now a designated backup rider. And hopefully somebody gets, not hurt, but off the bike for a while so I get some riding time.
I would have to say the most unexpected thing I've seen is how often the Kawasaki KLRs are breaking down.
The problems we've been facing on this journey has been caused by modification done to the 3 Kawasaki's. That's the bikes we have had major problems with. And if they hadn't done that, I think we would have had a much easier trip.
As we approach Eastern Europe, we pass through Saratov and Volgograd, the city formerly known as Stalingrad, and the site of World War II's most decisive battle. The entire city was destroyed, and today it's a veritable shrine to the lives that were lost here.
World War II seems to be the biggest part of the historical remembrance. People speak of the Soviet period, they don't speak favorably of it. They don't really talk about it a lot. They'd rather talk about the heroes of World War II. And our visit in Volgograd, boy, that was an experience. It's a very deep experience, that city having been destroyed during World War II. You can't go through the monuments and the experiences there without getting real sad for those people.
48th day of the tour, we crossed the border into the Ukraine, a former Soviet state, and a country with a lot of police on the road.
The Ukraine was a mess. The traffic police were just unreasonable.
They're young guys, they're very bored with their job. There's not that much traffic going past. They see an exotic motorcycle coming through and they just pull you over just basically to have a look at your bike. I think they're used to their presence easily intimidating the locals, and they expect us to respond in a similar way. But don't let that get to you, and as soon as they realise that it's not going to work, they'll generally give up and let you go on your way.
Some of the best roads of the whole trip are in the Crimean Peninsula on the Black Sea.
After crossing the Urals, we came down through the Ukraine and into Yalta, and we had a day's riding through very twisty roads, up and down, left and right. It was a full days of exhilarating riding, and after 12,000 kilometres of fairly straight, open roads, it was just wonderful to feel the bike working underneath me, and just put a big smile on my face.
This is like Australia for Ian. You're in paradise, huh?
I would say coming into Yalta was probably the favorite. In fact, it was so good I went back the next day and did a lot of that road again. And to me, it was just absolutely stimulating and fabulous.
To drop down to the beaches on the Black Sea coast, and then the road would wind its way back up inland around big rocky headlands. And it was the first sea, I guess, we'd seen for months, well, apart from just back in Russia. But yeah, I think that section of the coast on the Black Sea was just beautiful.
Yalta is one of the most popular Black Sea resorts on the Crimean Peninsula. Considered the Ukrainian Riviera, it has a wonderful Mediterranean climate in the midst of 4,000-foot mountains. Some of Russia's greatest writers and musicians retreated here for inspiration and to rest from the long Russian winters. One of the most famous landmarks in the city is the Levadia Palace, the place that put Yalta on the maps. It was here in 1945 where Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill met to decide the fate of Europe following World War II. Beautiful Odessa is the third largest city in the Ukraine and the largest seaport on the Black Sea. Always a cultural center, Odessa has produced some of the world's finest classical performers and boasts a history of classical education and refinement.
I had a lot of fun in Odessa. Me and a couple of friends went out to this strip, and that was 300 or 400 yards of solid discos and nightclubs, and go-go girls dancing up on stages out on the sidewalk. It was amazing. And we rode our motorcycles right down through this crowd of perhaps 1,000 people, and they just kind of enveloped us, and we went riding on through, and we parked in front of this one nightclub and just kind of hung out there for a couple hours and watched the whole scene. There was a reason we were going to do this, but I cannot remember what it is now.
In Lviv, we managed to find a few hours to work on the bikes and get them ready for the border crossing into Eastern Europe.
The suspension's broke, so we're putting a solid rod in to get us across the border. We're drilling and welding it, and then I'll have a fixed frame instead of a suspension just to get us over the border.
It's been a tough ride so far with all of the accidents and mechanical problems, but we're close enough to see the end in sight. After saying goodbye to our Russian guide and driver, our friend and fellow rider Mike Paul arrives. By now, he's fully recovered from the injuries he sustained at the beginning of the trip, and he'll be joining us for the ride across Europe.
We're back.
Up and around.
We're back and we're ready.
He even brought a new shock absorber for David's Kawasaki KLR.
All I can tell you is that the actual retail value of this product is $720. Holy shit. Can you believe that?
Now that the trip's almost done, you look back and say, man, that was a quick 2 months. You know, 6 weeks ago, I would have said, wow, we got 6 weeks to go. This is going to be a long trip.
The royal capital for half a millennium, Krakow has witnessed and absorbed more history than any other city in Poland.
Here, there's construction going on. The people have hope here. It's progressive.
It wasn't destroyed in the war. It's got the architecture. It's got the town square. It's a beautiful city.
Poland, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic fly by in rapid succession as we approach the end of the tour. Even Roy, who broke his ankle back in Siberia, is back on his bike for the final leg of the journey.
I don't think Roy, to this minute, really thinks he broke his ankle. And Roy just wasn't going to let it stop him. Here's a guy 68 years old, and he's going to finish the trip. We've been riding double, and he's riding me. I'm on the back.
I saw him go off the road in my mirrors, and by the time I got slowed down enough and that I could turn around and look back, I saw John going over the top of Roy and down into the grass. And then
Where does it hurt most right now?
by the time I got over there, everybody else had arrived.
Stay right where you're at if you're comfortable.
Rick's got an ambulance coming. An ambulance?
I didn't really know where to go because I didn't know where I was. And all I knew was I needed to get help. So I just hopped on my bike and went down the road a ways and found a house that I hoped somebody was in. And they didn't understand a word of English, but somehow made them understand we needed help and we needed it really soon. And then, I don't know, about 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, a chopper came and landed right next to us. I was like, whoa, I guess I got the help coming.
John has to spend a couple of days at a hospital in the Czech Republic and isn't able to finish the tour with the rest of the group. The arrival in Munich is a mixture of joy and relief. The trip of a lifetime is over. For the last 65 days, we've lived together and traveled halfway around the world on motorbikes. It was an incredible journey with more challenges than anyone anticipated, but everyone in the group worked together to fulfill their dreams. At the BMW Museum, Helge pays a visit to his dear Olga, the R80 GS that took him 220,000 miles around the world for 10 years during a previous chapter of his life. He suspected that the air in her tires would be a little low, so he came prepared. It was a great reunion, and he left with a promise to return again in 2 years.
I hope you enjoyed following the world tour for GlobeRiders, and I hope to see you all in 2004 for a new journey.
Yeah!